research first, then I will go to quantitative research and some elements of quantitative research. It's a vast area. If you want me to speak about quantitative research, I told Dr. Mohsin yesterday I can speak few days. It's such a vast area. So I will see how can I make it more useful and beneficial to you. All right. So let me share the screen. All right. So, all right. So when you do research, not many people can see it, right? If you are doing a research under your supervisor, then can you hear me? It's okay, right?
Yes, it's okay. I can hear you. I can hear you well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, ano yun Mohsin
As
Hassan
I was saying, basically, when you are conducting research, it's a very silent work. Not many people can see it. Only the respondents of your questionnaire or interview, whatever technique you use, they will know that you are conducting some kind of research. But at the end, when you conducted research, completed it, and then you present your research, you might be dropping a bombshell if your research is very impactful, very significant. For example, people who have been doing research to come out with a vaccine for COVID-19, we didn't know how the research took place. But when they came out with the vaccine, it was a bombshell, right? Many people were happy that vaccine is coming, whether it's going to work or not, but the vaccine is there. So it's very impactful. So when you do research, we start with very simple, but at the end, it could be very impactful. It may impact lives of millions or billions of people in the world. Okay, so when you do research, I will go through that. How can you make a research impactful? Okay. Now, this is basically a research definition. Let me quickly go through that. Research is an organized, objective, and systematic process. We have to always keep in mind, research is a systematic process. Keep that in mind, okay? There is a step-by-step procedure to conduct a research. And a research starts with a problem. We cannot do a research when we do not identify a problem. There must be a problem identified. Clearly defined and identified problem must be there. Because research is not something easy. As we say, it's a journey, it's an experience. So you have to have scientific method conducting research to solve a particular problem. That's where we found our MPhil student or master student or PhD student will struggle at the beginning. They will just come and tell us, Prof, I want to do a research. I said, what do you want to do? I want to research on this. I said, why you want to do it? Will you start questioning? All right, that's how the research starts. So the student must portray to prove to us that there's some kind of problem exists in the society or industry that is affecting people, the society, the country, or the world. And they want to do research to find out some kind of solution to the problem. Okay, it's like when you're going to a doctor, doctor will ask you, what is the problem with you? And you say, I'm having this problem, that problem. So by talking to you, the doctor will already collect data about the problem, and later will decide, whether you have to do some kind of investigation, blood test and urine test and whatnot. And finally, he will give you a kind of medicine, okay? So it is also a scientific inquiry, basically the doctor is doing qualitative research, finding out all the information from you, and then he's deciding. Okay, so there must be a problem to conduct a research. You have to remember that, you have to keep that in mind. Research, as I always say, that this definition I love, research is a voice of discovery, it is a journey. So when you start research, you cannot simply just start. You have to pack your bag and then you have to start. So you need to have some preparation before you do research. So we read some papers, we talk to people, we talk to academicians, we talk to people from industry, and then one day we'll pick up, to do the actual research, okay? Now, when you do research, this is conceptualizing a research study. You will have a title, but the title should be reflective of a research problem that you have in hand. Okay, you have a research problem and you have to solve it. So therefore, definitely it has to be there. The problem must be there in hand, and you have to understand it. You have to prove to people. So when you watch a movie, basically in all movies, you will see at the beginning, the plot will be shown. And that plot will determine whether the viewers would like to continue or they don't want to continue. So in a research, you have to have a research problem. And when you identify and define research problem correctly, then a reader of your research paper or reader of your thesis draft will be interested to whether to continue to read or not, And when they finish reading, they want to see some kind of answers of those problems. Same goes to a movie, right? When you watch a movie, the plot is shown at the beginning. At the end of the movie, then the plot is unfolded, right? So you are being shown what is actually happened and how did it solve, right? So at the end of the movie, you laugh and you cry and all that. So that's how the research is started. There must be a identified and defined research problem. You have a purpose statement, you will have research questions, you will have research objectives, and quantitative research method. What is very important is based on the research questions, you will construct research hypothesis. In qualitative research, there may not be research hypothesis. There could be some cases research hypothesis also there, but in quantitative research, in all research, there must be research hypothesis constructed. So how do we construct research hypothesis? I'll come into it afterwards, okay? Now, these are the components of empirical research. We start with the research problem, okay? Then we translate it into research question, research objectives. Then we will do literature review and find out underpinning theories. We develop a theoretical framework, we construct hypothesis, okay? We go for instrumentation, all right? We'll collect the data, we choose sampling and all that, we do analysis, and finally we interpret and recommend. Okay, so this is basically the component of research. But when you are writing your MPhil thesis or PhD thesis or master thesis, there are chapterization, right? Chapter 1, chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, depending on the institution. Different universities have different structure. Like my university, basically we have 5: introduction, literature review; 3rd chapter, theoretical framework, research methodology; chapter 4, your results; and chapter 5, discussion and conclusion. But it varies from university to university, but it's more or less similar kind of flow that we have, okay? This is something I share with most of my webinars, but I'm not going to talk about this a lot. This is an analogy that I have developed and proposed, and it's being appreciated almost in the whole world, okay? And I have applied for patenting this. I'm comparing research with a tree, okay? So the problem, if you see a tree having a problem, then definitely it because of the roots. Sometimes it could be on the, you see the leaves are dropping and all that, drying, but definitely it could be because of the roots, the problem in the roots, because of short of water, could be short of fertilization, could be short, quality of soils and all that affect the tree. So that one, I put it as research problem, okay? And when you collect the data, that is very important. Your data has to be collected from where the problem occurred. Okay, so whether the tree is good or not, you have to look at the root, whether you need fertilizers and all that. So the data should be collected from exactly the source of the problem. Okay, so that is there. And I compare the body of the tree with research framework and models, which I'm going to talk about it later. So how strong your research is dependent on the theoretical framework and the model that you develop. Students who undertake research in economics, finance, they will have modeling. So that's why I put a model. But if you are doing research, quantitative research, almost all quantitative research will have either a theoretical framework or you'll have a model. And based on your theoretical framework and model, you will construct hypotheses. So that is the very special, distinctive feature of quantitative research. We have to remember that, okay? And the branches of the tree, I put it as underpinning theory. Every research must be supported by some kind of theory. Quantitative research and quantitative research. Qualitative research, you may not need to have a supporting theory, but quantitative research, there must be some theories. There could be one underpinning theory, but it's possible to have one underpinning theory and few supporting theories. And that's why I put the branches of the tree and underpinning theories, okay? And the leaves of the tree, I put in a literature review. Basically, the leaves of the tree will beautify the tree, and it also does, functions. Some other important functions are there. How good the tree is, if you look at the leaf, you would know. So that literature review is a part and parcel of research. And finally, your outcome of research, I compare with the fruits. If the fruit is good, so that's what is looked at, right? If fruit is not good, you know there is a problem. And the problem comes from the root. Could be fertilization, water, soil quality, all problems are there. So in a research, when you finish it, complete it, and come out with the research outcomes, so that is the fruits that we talk about, okay? So I don't spend time with it. I think I've explained a bit. I think should be enough for this, because today's topic is more on quantitative research. So let me go into that. Now, in categories of research, basically we categorize research into three: qualitative research, quantitative research, so it could be even mixed method. Dr. Mohsin, when you were chatting before starting the session, you was talking about triangulation, right? Mixed method, we'll be looking at that also. The current trend is more towards mixed method. Not only qualitative or quantitative, rather we are propagating that it should be some kind of mixed method research. So even though we do qualitative research, we may have some parts of quantitative research, and for that we have NVivo, Atlas T, and many other softwares available. Or when you are doing quantitative research, you may still have some parts of qualitative research added to it, okay? So that is advisable now. So you do not only depend on qualitative or do not only depend on quantitative, rather we propagate now that, or we promote that some kind of mixed research method should be there, okay, for validation, verification purposes. This is triangulation, right? Merger of qualitative, quantitative, okay? So we may conduct research simultaneously, qualitative and quantitative together. We can have ongoing qualitative research and then multiple waves of quantitative. We can have quantitative precedes the qualitative. So we do quantitative first and then we proceed to qualitative. Or we may perform series of research, starting with qualitative, then quantitative, then qualitative, okay? So even triangulation, we have many different kind of approaches are there. It's basically merger between quantitative and qualitative. So again, which one is the best? There is no right answer for this, because it all depends on kind of research problem that you have identified and defined, okay? So depending on research problem, as I said, if you go and see a doctor, and doctor will identify whether you need, what kind of investigation you need. If just talking to you and doctor can already identify the disease, he just give you the medication, enough. But if he feels that you need to go through a blood test, okay, they will do blood test. After that, he still cannot conclude, they will ask you to do CT scan, endoscopy, and there's so many different tests are there, they will do. So that's what research methods also. If needed, you need to have different cycle of research, even in one research problem identified. To find a solution to a particular research problem, you may need that, okay? Now, this is how the cycle is. All research start with qualitative. You do not do quantitative first. You can never be able to do quantitative first. A research start with qualitative, okay? And then we hypothesize. I'm going to explain more about it later when I talk about inductive and deductive research. I'm hopeful that you will understand more on that. Research start with qualitative, then we proceed to quantitative. Even in a quantitative research, you do literature review first. That is a qualitative research, okay? We talk to academicians, we talk to industry people, that's a qualitative research. And we collect we do some prior research before we undertake quantitative research, okay? So we start with qualitative, then we proceed to quantitative, and then still we cannot solve the problem completely, then we have to again explore into qualitative study, and this continues, it's a cycle. Okay, so any research you take up, you will realize when you read research papers, thousands of people have done research on this, on almost every country. So sometimes academicians will question you, why again? Why again? You know, so many people have done research. It's because you want to validate, you want to upgrade, you want to, verify, you want to nullify. You want to prove the effectiveness of finding the theories and all that. So research continues, even the same area, because things are changing outside. Too much of changes taking place in the outside world. And that requires us to do research, new research, okay, even though many research have been undertaken before. Let us look at the definition, okay. If you look at introduction, basic introduction, Aliaga and Gunderson, 2000, define quantitative research and explaining phenomenon of phenomena by collecting numerical data that are analyzed using mathematically based models. Okay, so quantitative research method basically is a research that is conducted using numerical data and definitely using solid, robust statistical analysis. All right, so that one you have to keep in mind. All data must be numerical, numbers, and then we use statistics to prove, disapprove, we accept or reject hypothesis. But again, let me remind you also, we may have qualitative data that can be converted into quantitative, possible. Huh? Now we use content analysis. Look at the annual reports of companies, and from there we look at the terms, how many times repeated. So we take that, make it as quantitative, then we can continue. Huh? So there are many different approaches available also there. So since my focus is not on that, so I'm not going to talk about a lot on content analysis, but it's possible looking at the content and quantify it. One of my PhD students has completed PhD on Sukuk, Islamic bond, and he looks into all the annual reports of companies, okay, and then extract it and convert it into numerical and use PLS to analyze the data. All right. This is another one by Baby and others, okay, from a book. It says quantitative method emphasizes objective measurement and the statistical, mathematical, numerical analysis, right, of data collected through polls, questionnaires, surveys, and all that. So again, we are talking about numerical. Huh? Numerical is statistical. We are talking about that. So we are saying quantitative research focuses on gathering numerical data and generalizing is across the group of people. So that's where the sampling, question of sampling will come in. And I have a little slide on it also. I will talk about it. Huh? So between these two slides, right? So we are talking about numerical data. We are talking about the statistical analysis. These are the basic, important, distinctive feature of quantitative research. So it's numerical data basically, right? So you're measuring the data that is being analyzed, gathered, right? The main aim is to focus on counting and classifying features and constructing statistical models, okay? That's the basic features of quantitative research. When should we do a quantitative research? If a study aims to find out answers to an inquiry through numerical evidence, we are not looking at qualitative data, we are looking at numerical numbers. When you have numbers, say for example, you have to do a study on bank performance, all numerical data available. You have to do company performance, organizational performance study on any company. Then you can even use survey questionnaire. The data is going to be numbers, or you can take data from annual report. Okay, so that's again numbers. So when you have numbers, quantitative data, numerical data, then definitely you cannot do a qualitative study. It's definitely going to be quantitative research. Okay, but as we said earlier that all research is start with qualitative, then we will proceed to quantitative. Okay. Now the main focus, as I said earlier, first is quantitative data. It must be quantitative, numerical data. Number two, it must be analyzed using a statistical or mathematical model. And number three, there must be some hypothesis constructed, and then we test it using statistical methods. So these three are the basic features of a quantitative research. You have to keep that in mind. Huh? So quantitative data is information about quantities, information that can be measured and written down in numbers. So that's what we call quantitative data. I hope you understand the difference between data and information, right? Data are basically raw facts and figures, and all data may not be useful for everyone. So when we collect the raw data and facts and figures, and then we extract it, make it useful for someone, that becomes information. Okay, so that becomes, so data is the raw facts and figure, and the processed data become information. That's the second stage. And when somebody has possession of information, we will say knowledge. Okay, so there are stages of those. Differentiation of data, information, knowledge is there. So data are the basic, the raw facts and figures. And when we convert data into something useful, then it becomes information. And when somebody has in possession of information, we'll call it as knowledge. Okay, when you say somebody is knowledgeable because he has information about it. Okay, all right. So quantitative data, for example, very simple examples are our height, our size, shoe size, length of our fingernails, and all that. So quantitative data basically defines, but qualitative data describes, okay, as I put it in a simple way. So quantitative data will define. So it's easy for you to identify your height is 5 inches and 9 inches. That's it. That is defined definition is there. But qualitative data basically describe. It describes. He looks very shabby. You know. He looks bit fat, or he is bit thin. You know. So you are describing, but you are not giving the numbers. He is taller, but you are not telling exactly how tall he is. That is qualitative. But you are saying he is 6 feet tall. So that is quantitative. You are defining already. So quantitative is defining, qualitative is basically describing. This is basically another important features in quantitative data. Okay, so you will have some kind of unit of analysis, and then you will have a variable. Okay, so let me go to the next slide. I do have slides on it. This is unit of analysis that every research will have. So depending on where does the problem comes from. So if your research involves individuals, customers, employees, so your unit of analysis will be individual. If your data coming from family, extended family, then your unit of analysis household. If your problem coming from business and business unit, your unit of analysis is organization. If your research problem rooted in the sales and all the departments, it's a department, right? And your problem is coming from geographical areas, then your basically unit of analysis geographical areas. So that one you have to keep in mind, because when you do analysis, especially in quantitative research, you need to have defined unit of analysis, and it's very important. Many times I ask PhD student during Viva Voce, what is your unit of analysis? And they look very blah, and they look at our face, and it looks like they never heard of it, which is very unexpected. MPhil student, PhD student must understand what is the unit of analysis. The unit that you are analyzing. Where does this unit come from? Where your problem is rooted? Where his problem is rooted? Where does the problem comes from? If you are doing a study on employee satisfaction, so problem is rooted in employees, among the employees. So the data comes from employees. So your unit of analysis, individual employees. Okay, that's how it is. But I put a red mark there. Please always keep in mind, if your unit of analysis is individual, then you cannot use organization level theory. If your unit of analysis is organization, you cannot use individual level theory. So all theories are basically, certain theories are categorized individual level theory. It helps you to measure individuals, and certain theories are basically organization level theories. So now the question would be, how do I know which theory is individual level theory or which theory is organization level theory? You have to read the theory carefully and find out what are the assumptions taken into the theory. If you find the assumptions taken in the theories individual level assumption, then it's individual level theory. Is all assumptions are basically organization level assumption, then this is organization level theory. Okay. Now, what kind of research design would be most appropriate in quantitative research? Okay, so there are many different kind of approaches available, but in quantitative research, basically, if you want to do a descriptive study, correlational study, causal, comparative, or quasi-experimental study, or experimental research, then quantitative research should be more appropriate. Okay, there's in another way I'm saying we are saying that there are basically 4 types of quantitative research design. Descriptive, you are describing the phenomena through analyzing the numerical data. SPSS, PLS will help you doing that. We can do a correlational study by looking at different variables and factors. I'm going to show it afterwards. Comparative study or quasi-experimental study or experimental study can be also done by quantitative data. These are some advantages of quantitative research. Basically, it is an excellent way. It is an excellent way for you to finalize the results, by accepting or rejecting hypothesis. All the numerical data that you collect and use statistical methods to test. So at the end, you will have a conclusion whether your assumptions taken, hypothesis constructed, accepted or rejected. So you make a conclusion on it. Okay. So that's a very good advantage. In a qualitative research, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to conclude on it because you talk to people, you go deeper into an issue. Only few respondents, and from there you have to make a conclusion. So it's not that easy. those Viva Voce I have attended as external examiner or as a chairman of the session for qualitative research, I found students really struggle to answer questions raised by the examiners. It's a very difficult kind of research compared to quantitative. Huh? Myself, basically a quantitative person. I think Dr. Mohsin is qualitative. So in quantitative, it's easier than qualitative because you can easily conclude based on accepted or rejected hypotheses, okay? And through statistical analysis, you can actually reach a statistical, comprehensive answer to a phenomena that you have identified because you do have a sampling methods available. I'm going to talk about it. So based on a small sample, we generalize on a bigger segment of population, okay? And quantitative experience does also help you to filter out external factors. So when you learn SPSS and PLS, you will learn how to filter the data, all right? Some disadvantages also there. So I'm not going to spend time on it. I will share the slide with you, so you can go through that, okay? Now, research can be also from philosophical perspective. You can divide into two. If you look at PhD, it's basically Doctor of Philosophy. So there should be some philosophical foundation of research. Okay. So for reasoning, we do divide the types of discourse into exposition and argument. And research basically is more on argumentative. So that's where we'll divide into deduction and induction, or deductive approach or inductive approach. Huh? So earlier we looked into 4 kinds of research design, but now we are looking at research approaches. So if somebody asks you how many research approaches are there, it's basically 2, either deductive research approach or inductive research approach. Quantitative, qualitatives are research methods, okay? And research design, you have 4. So we have to understand all the languages of research, so be careful on it. So inductive and deductive are basically approaches in research. So this is a deductive research. You have an established theory. From the theory, we make assumption, we collect data, and finally we accept or reject hypothesis. On the other hand, or maybe possibly, okay, sorry. So this is starting with the theory, okay. So meaning that something is already there. Something is already there. People have done research, they have made conclusion, assumptions are there. So you take assumption from there and you assume, you make assumption, you collect data, the statistical analysis, you accept or reject hypothesis. Okay? And I put it this way. This is a deductive approach example. It's a beautiful garden and you collect whatever flower you want. So everything is there. You just collect what you want. And you can make a conclusion whether this garden is good or not. So if you get all the chosen flowers that you want, you will conclude the garden is good for you. If you do not get many flowers that you wanted, then this garden is not good. Okay. So this is deductive approach. Everything is there. Okay. So the theory is there. Based on the theory, you do it. Inductive is different. Completely opposite. So you observe phenomena, you analyze the pattern, you formulate relationship, you develop a theory. This is inductive. So deductive starts where inductive ends. And that's what I have started, my session today. I said we start with qualitative, we proceed to quantitative, then you follow to qualitative, and that continues. Okay. So inductive, we started with theory. From the theory, you construct hypothesis, but deductive, right? Inductive, you start observing phenomena, and then you go to deeper into it, explore into it, and you formulate relationship. At the end, you might be developing or proposing a theory or relationship. Okay. Now, this is the analogy that I put. Inductive research is like that. You are landing on a garden, you have the soil, and then you plow the soil, right? You harvest the tree, you water the tree, you give fertilizers, and finally you have what flowers you wanted. Okay, this is inductive. It's starting from 0, and at the end you are coming to a conclusion. That's inductive. But deductive, we have something already there, and from there you start working on it, and finally you make a conclusion. Okay. I hope with these 2 examples, you would be very clear on the differences between inductive and deductive research approach. Okay. So these are the type of study I have explained earlier, the research design. So I'm not going to go into that. Okay. So these are the languages of research that all of us should understand. So we have concepts, we have models, we have theories, hypothesis, variable. We'll have operation definition, conceptual scheme, and constructs. Okay. in all research, anyone who would like to do research, these are the terms everybody should understand. Okay, so all research, you start with ideas. You start with ideas. So you have some ideas, you start research on it. You observe some problem and you develop some ideas. From ideas, then you convert into concept, something visible, measurable, understandable. Okay, so concept. The idea could be just a stupid idea, may not make sense at all, you know. But when you can put it in a way people can figure it out, people can visualize it, it becomes concept. And when you can measure it, it becomes construct. Okay, it becomes construct. So from the construct, constructs could be variables also, right? From the constructs, we define the variable. We come to conclusion on variables. So when variables are tested and relationships are put in a framework, it becomes theoretical framework. From there, we construct hypotheses, and when it is proved or not proved, based on that, we reject a theory, we develop a theory, we extend a theory, verify a theory, we modify a theory, and all that we do. Okay. So this is how it starts, right? A theory is designed based on ideas. You know, ideas are, as you say, it's just something abstract. And then comes to a concept when it can be visualized, can be understandable, can be seen. And then when you make it something can be measurable, then it become construct. And from there, we assume relationships, it become propositions. And when propositions are proved, it become a theory. All right. Operationalizing of your construct, okay, the ideas. So this will follow that, right? So from construct, we'll have operation definition. Under operation definition, we'll have dimensions and we have elements. We take an example, say, for example, your construct is organization performance. So organization performance can be measured by various angles. It can be based on the sales. It could be based on the profits. It could be even based on repeated customers, you know. It could be based on new customers. So there are many different ways of measuring organization performance. Okay. So operation definition is basically when you are deciding which one you are accepting. So for example, you are looking at financial performance. You are measuring performance through financial data, or you are measuring performance from non-financial data. Okay, so that's where you are going to define operational definition. So if you decide, say, for example, you want to measure organization performance by financial data, then it will come into dimension. What are the dimensions you are going to use? Of course, I understand that now you are measuring organization performance by financial data, but financial data, there's so many. So is it going to be sale? Is it going to be based on profit, or is it going to be something else? So that are the dimensions, okay? And from there, you will go into elements, specific. When you say even sales, it is going to be monthly sale, daily sale, yearly sale. It becomes elements, you know, small elements. And if you are designing questionnaire, then you will have, say, for example, even financial, non-financial, both can be done by doing a survey questionnaire. So in the questionnaire, you will again divide into dimension, and based on that, every dimension, you will have elements, you know. So you will have elements in there. So each item, 1 item, 2 item, 3 item is like that. So operationalizing, you know, research ideas. So that's how we do it, okay? Now, earlier we were talking about type of variables. So in a research, you will have many different kind of variables. But the first category, we call it dichotomous. When you have categorical, in an easy way, we call it just categorical variable. Male and female, employed, unemployed, married, single, and all that. You know, so you have discrete variable like education background, ethnic background, all that. And then you will have continuous variable. That is continuous, right? So we do understand that. I don't think I have to explain. In a quantitative research, as I said, most of the time we will have theoretical framework. And in the theoretical framework, you will have variables. Variables are what? That varies, you know, something that varies. That's why you call it variable, okay? So dependent variable is the variable that is dependent on many other factors. So that is dependent variable. Independent variable are really independent. Say, for example, if you are going to see the doctor, you are not feeling well. So that is, you are unhealthy. That is dependent variable. Why you are unhealthy? Because you are having body ache, you are having fever and all that. So those are independent variable. That's causing the dependent variable, okay? In between, you may have intervening variable. These two, this can be divided into two: moderating variable and mediating variables, okay? Those are very important. If you are doing MPhil, we expect one moderating or mediating variable to be there. Just independent and dependent is not enough. We expect you to have some kind of intervening variable. For PhD is a must. You know, nowadays it become must. A lot of research has been undertaken. So something new, you know, to contribute something new, you need to have moderating, mediating, or something else. Okay. We do have also antecedent variable and outcome variable, which I'm going to explain a bit afterwards. Is it important to have a theoretical framework in the quantitative research? If it is not finance or economics, then I would say it's a must. If it is management, if you are talking about marketing, if you are talking about any management or marketing areas, theoretical framework is a must. Okay, so what we do, we take materials from literature review from theories, and then we're working on the definition of main construct, you know, that become variable and put them in the framework. Okay, so how does the framework looks like? This is a simple framework that I put it for you. So this is how it is. You know, the title is Factors Affecting Internet Abuse. I use the same framework everywhere so that the student can easily understand. What are the factors that contribute to the internet abuse? So we have taken 3 variables. So these are the independent, this is dependent variable. So these 3 variables come from theory of planned behavior. As I said earlier, right, in the tree analogy, you must have a theory to support your theoretical framework, because you call it theoretical framework. It must be supported by theories. Okay, there must be some theories to support you. So this is coming from theory of planned behavior. You can come out with a new variable with some kind of, you know, factor analysis and all that. You want to come out with something new, then possible. But again, through literature review you can find, or you can have your own, but it has to be through a proper method. So I'm going to show you afterwards. Okay. So this is a framework, and how many hypotheses can you have? You can have 3 relationship here. Relationship between attitude and internet abuse, relationship between subjective norm and internet abuse, relationship between perceived behavioral control and internet abuse. So basically you have 3 hypotheses here. So all these, if all these 3 hypotheses are accepted proof, then you will say that if you are doing a study in Pakistan context, then you will say TPB, theory of planned behavior. This theory is useful in measuring internet abuse in Pakistan, in the context of Pakistan. So these are the synonyms we use. Independent variable, we have different names, and also dependent variable, we do have some other names. Okay. Now this is something very important that I propose something new. This is my proposal. Okay, I came out with a template to plot your research problem. Okay. So you look at the situation and see what are the problems there, and then you plot it in a template, and then from there you go to your theoretical framework. Okay, and if you look at here, I put the thesis title as financial business risks and farm value. So farm value is the dependent variable, you know that, and that is the main problem. What is affecting the farm value? So the student look at credit risk, liquidity risk, operation risk, right? So these are the risks that contribute to the farm value. All right, and then he does have also a moderating variable. He put a financial innovation that may help increase the effect of independent to dependent, or decrease, you know, the effect of independent to dependent. So this is how it can be done. So this is done through literature review. Okay, so you are showing the literature theoretical gap or knowledge gap through literature review. But what is very important now to me, I find one of the poorest side of PhD thesis is we concentrate too much on academic, forgetting that the people who are going to use our research findings are the people who are in the industry, you know, the society and people. So we have to relate our research to that. All right, so here I give you another template whereby you can plot the issues affecting the industry. Okay, so you have knowledge gap and you have contextual, industrial, or practical gap. These two comes together and that define your research problem correctly. So at the end, you will have clear-cut answers. You know, these are the problem, these are the issues. So these are the research issues that define your research problem. Okay, I have seen many in the final viva versus session. Examiners will drill the students asking, What are the issues? What are the issues? So I came out with this template. If you plot all these issues here, so it's easier for you to tell, well, look at it, these are the issues that I have, and these issues actually contributing to the research problem. These are the issues that have created that research problem. If I can solve all these issues, the research problem is resolved. Okay, so all these issues are independent variable or moderating mediating variable, and your research problem is the dependent variable. Okay, so this is how a framework looks like again, right? Okay, let me, sorry, I go to PBS. Okay, so this is, you can see here, you do have here a framework. You have independent variable, dependent, in between you have something, but I'm going to talk about it afterwards. So hypotheses are there. Now, you may have antecedents, okay? Earlier, I have showed you this framework, right? Independent and dependent. You have seen it before. Before independent, you may have also factors plotted there. So those are called antecedents, okay? So now, is it essential for you to have antecedent variable in all research? The answer is no. There are cases whereby you may need to have antecedent variables there. This is a must, as I said, for quantitative research. Theoretical framework is a must, okay? Because based on that, you will have constructed, you will be constructing the hypothesis. You will depict in a framework, then you will construct hypothesis, okay? Or you will have a research model. I'm going to talk about it afterwards, okay? So you may have antecedents here. So based on that, you will again construct hypothesis, okay? And you may have moderating variables. It comes between independent, dependent, right? As I said earlier, intervening variables, right? This is how it is. I don't think I should be discussing a lot on it. You can refer to my YouTube channel. Those of you know already. Platform for Research and Development. You can just go to YouTube and you can type Platform for Research and Development. That is my YouTube channel. And I have about 50 videos all about research method. So I do have few videos on theoretical framework. You can watch, listen, and you can understand more, inshallah, okay? This is, the moderating variable coming in between dependent and independent. You may have mediating variable. Just give me a few seconds. Okay.
Mama,
I think this one also I will exclude from my discussion. This is how a mediating variable works, a framework. It goes independent mediator to dependent. That's how it is. This should be the right way of doing it. You are doing a mediation. Direct impact, direct relationship between independent and dependent. And then you have a moderating in between independent and dependent. That is mediation, okay? This is not right, huh? You may have even outcome variable, okay? So you may have something after dependent variable. That's what we call outcome variable. So I'm not going to spend time on this also, okay? You may have even control variable, which is a common feature in finance, accounting, and economics research, okay? You may have control variables. So again, for today's topic, I'm going to exclude that. Huh? Now, this is important. You are talking about models, okay? So for econometrics modeling or for economics finance, we may have modeling rather than a theoretical framework. We depict, we show the framework, we translate the framework into model, okay? And from the model, we will show the hypothesis. It's easier to see. You can see the model is like that. So this is a research whereby you put dependent variable here and then all independent variable are depicted there. So we will call it a model specification. So this student have 4 different models because he has independent to dependent. He looks at different independent at different time, different group of independent variable. And then the third and fourth one is looking at moderating impact, okay, together with the control variable. So you'll have models, all right? Now, so there are a few things very important, right? We said for quantitative research, you must have numerical data, right? Number 2, you must use statistics or mathematics to analyze. Number 3, we say you must construct hypotheses. Number 4, we say it must be supported by theories, right? So these are the one you got to very, very careful. So when you are constructing hypothesis, it must be from a theoretical form. You got to be careful. Now, when you're collecting data, you got to have sample. You cannot collect data from everyone. Say, for example, you are doing a study on customer satisfaction on mobile phone. So there are thousands of people using mobile phone in your country. Can you collect data from everyone? You can't. So you have to take a small portion. As you see in the picture, when you go to the market and you want to buy an orange, the shopkeeper may not give you the full orange for you to taste, right? He might just give you a piece of orange and taste it, and you decide, you make a conclusion. All oranges are good, so you buy. Seems like you are going to buy mangoes, you buy. The mango seller will give a slice of it and you taste and you feel like, oh, it's good, so you buy all. You do not know that all mangoes are good. You do not really know all oranges are good, but with little taste, you will decide and conclude that all are good, okay? So in research, we do that. We take data from few people, then we analyze, and then we make a conclusion over everyone, generalization of your findings. It's very important because we cannot collect data from everyone. So there are certain terminologies are there, which is important. Sample is a small part of larger sample. Population is basically the total people who could be, your respondents. Then you have elements, the individual members, and if you take everybody in the research, small population, you call it census, or we are taking a part of it, you call it sample, and we'll have a sampling frame also, okay? So I usually give very simple examples. Say, for example, you are doing a research on student satisfaction in your university. So you have 10,000 students. You are not going to collect data from 10,000. So you will say, okay, I will collect data only from those students doing masters, MPhil, and PhD. So your sampling frame become master, MPhil, and PhD student. And from there, you will have certain method to choose a smaller size. That is going to be sample, okay? So these are the easiest way of answering, what do you want to generalize, become your population? What population you have the access, become a study population? How do you access to them, become sample frame? And who is in your study, become sample? This is your target population, study population, and finally that is small sample is like slice of an orange, right? Or slice of mango. Same again, right? Target population, the sampling frame to sample. Okay. Now in sampling method, I still have 15 minutes time. Okay. Sampling method, there we categorize into two: probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Please understand this very well. I put only, I think, one slide. When do we use probability sampling? Probability sampling meaning when all people in the population have equal chance to be selected. Nobody knows who is going to be selected, right? So under this sampling method, we have 6 methods. All methods basically ensures that there's a fair way of selecting respondents, okay? But when should you use probability sampling? Number one condition, when you have the list of the whole population. You must have list, okay? If you cannot obtain the list of whole population, you cannot use probability sampling. You have to go to the non-probability sampling. Please bear in mind that, be careful. Many people, even many professors encountered, they have misunderstanding on it. Okay, to use probability sampling, you must obtain the full list. So when you say I'm using random sampling, people have understanding of I just choose randomly, but it's not. Random sample also a very systematic sampling procedure because it's probability sampling. Everybody is ensured of fairness of selecting them. So you choose, you have the list of respondents. From the list, you choose randomly. That is called simple random sampling. Okay. If it's systematic random sampling, then if we start with, say, for example, number 2, then 12, then 22, then 32. That's how it goes. Or you start with 11, 21, 31, 41. It's from the list. If you don't have the list, you cannot use probability sampling. So when you don't have the list, you go for non-probability. Convenience sampling. You choose respondents that is convenient to you. People who live nearby you. Or you go to the supermarket and just distribute questionnaire, collect it. You don't have the list. You just go and collect the data. Okay. So that is number one condition. To use probability sampling, you must obtain the list of total population. From there, you use either one, the system, then you choose your random, your population. Okay, sorry, your sampling. That's the probability sampling. If you cannot obtain the list of all respondents, the whole population, then you have to go for non-probability. You don't have the list, so you just choose them based on the 4 methods, 5 methods available there. Number 2, if you need a strong generalization, then you have to go for probability sampling. If you do not really need a strong generalization at the end of your study, then you can proceed to non-probability sampling. Okay. So when you need a strong generalization, you have to go for probability sampling. If you do not need a strong generalization, you go for non-probability sampling. Okay. So that's the two conditions that you have to remember. First one is when you obtain the least of whole population, you go for probability sampling. When you need strong generalization, you go for probability sampling. When you cannot obtain the least of total population, you go for non-probability. And when you do not need a strong generalization, you go for non-probability. Okay. How about the sampling size? It's important, right? How do I know how many I have to take? So this is from Christian Morgan. He provided a table. I think it's available in all research books. You have to have a system of deciding how many should be in my sample. Huh? If your total population more than 100,000, the number is 384 is enough. Okay. How do they arrive at this number? They collected data and they tested it statistically. So it took a lot of time for them to develop this table. Or even you can follow Umar Sakharan. Okay. For business research, we follow Umar Sakharan. In social science like psychology, sociology, we follow Christian Morgan. Okay. But almost similar thing, all right. But there are many other methods also available for you to determine your sample size. Okay. Now, in quantitative research, how do we collect the data? Data could be collected based on, it could be primary data, like you conduct interview, all that, that would be going to be your qualitative research. But quantitative research, for primary data, we design questionnaire. We design questionnaire based on the variables that we already identified and put it in the theoretical framework. So each variable, we may have about 5 items, 5 questions to measure the variable, okay? So it could be more, could be less, but you need to have minimum 2. So when you attend workshop and SPSS or PLS, we will explain you why I need to have minimum 2, okay? Or you can have secondary data. The data is already available. So you can collect data from banks, insurance companies, you can collect data from annual reports of companies, you can collect data from university records and all that. So those secondary data, numerical, are actually used more in quantitative research. If you are using primary data, then it's supposed to be survey with questionnaire, all right? You use a questionnaire to collect data, and it's a quantitative data, then you analyze and make a conclusion on it, okay? Now, when you design questionnaire, there are 3 approaches of survey questionnaire designing. You can adopt it. You can adopt it, meaning that some researchers have used the questionnaire in some other countries or even in our country, and they have used the validity and reliability tests, and they have established that this is a good instrument. Then you can adopt it and you just continue distributing, collecting data, okay, for your research. This is called adaptation. So if you're adopting, then you don't have to do really pilot test or pre-test, not required, because the validity and reliability already tested. You can adapt it. Say, for example, you are taking questionnaire from Australia, US, or UK from some research, and you make changes and contextualize it in your country context. That's what you call adaptation. You're taking items from people, but you're making some changes. In that case, you need to have a pre-testing or pilot testing. Either one is okay to me. Mostly we'll go for pilot testing, collect data from 30 to 100, and then we run factor analysis or reliability testing, okay, that will be good enough to conclude that these items are very good, it can be used. Or you can use your own. But if you are using your own instrument, you got to be very careful. It must follow 3 steps. It must follow 3 steps. Number 1, once you design the questionnaire items, it has to be shared with at least 2 academicians and 2 industry people, and get their comments and recommendations and make changes based on them. And once you get feedback from academic and industry, then you have to do pilot testing. And after pilot testing, you do adjustment, then you do pre-testing, then you do adjustment, then only finally you distribute the questionnaire, okay? Well, I have seen many students struggle during the final viva. They show like they are very proud because they have designed their own questionnaire, you know, they feel very proud. But they do not realize that by doing that, they are actually putting themselves in trouble. Because if you design your own instrument, then you have to follow 3 steps, okay? Getting comments from industry and academic people. Number 2, you need to have pilot testing. Number 3, you need to have pre-testing before you finally distribute the questionnaire, okay? All right. Now, data analysis, I'm almost at the end of the topic because we do have another speaker and very knowledgeable and very experienced speaker. So I'll leave it to him. So we have number of softwares available to analyze the data. We do have SPSS, which is very easy and user-friendly, 3rd generation software. And now we do have 4th generation software available, SAM PLS and SAM AMOS, structured equation modeling, right? But again, if you want to use PLS, even still you need to learn SPSS. So that's the basic, okay? When should you use SPSS or PLS? I leave that question for today, right? So if you have time series data, basically you will go for SPSS mostly. But if you have even data cross-sectional, you can use. But we prefer, if you have smaller number of sample, we choose PLS. If you have bigger sample, you go for SPSS. You know, there are a number of ways of looking at that, which can be discussed later. And if you have panel data, you know, students undertaking research in economics, finance, accounting, then you will use Stata. I have written a book on Stata. I hope I will be printed by next month. Then I can share the book with you, okay? So Stata would be useful in case if you have the panel data, all right? I think I have to end this here. I hope that with the short lecture, you will find it useful and helpful to undertake your research. And now I pass the button to Dr. Mohsin. Dr. Mohsin.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much for sharing such a wonderful insights, you know.